Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I want to remind you to grab a notepad. You're going to need one today. Grab a notepad and a pen. So pause the video right now if you don't have one in front of you. Grab that notepad, grab that pen, and then make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down some sort of action item that you are going to implement in your business today. All right, let's get started. I'm going to tell you something, but I want you to just use discretion, okay? I've got this great business idea, and I don't know, it could be worth millions, maybe billions. I mean, this is huge. It could be revolutionary. It could change the world. I'm going to tell you about it, but don't tell anyone, all right? Have you done this? I've done this continually since I was a kid. I would come up with great ideas. I am an idea generator. I come up with lots of ideas. And when I share these ideas with people, I will frequently tell them, okay, don't tell anyone. I'm not in a position right now to get started on this idea. And so I just want to share it. I just got to get it off my chest. I got to tell someone. And you know, you're doing this kind of using a sounding board from somebody to see if they think it's a great idea. Often the person I'm communicating with will be like, they will be underwhelmed and they won't see it. And I'll be like, you just don't understand it. I didn't explain it correctly. Here's what I got to tell you though. In fact, I still do this. I did this recently. Within the last 2 months, I came up with what I think is a brilliant idea. And before sharing it with the first person that I shared it with, I was all excited about it. And I said, don't tell anyone. And you know, the person's always like, who am I going to tell? Who am I going to tell? And what are you worried about? You're worried about they're going to tell someone who thinks it's a brilliant idea and they are going to go and implement that idea and you're going to lose it. They're going to make a fortune. The other thing that I've done a lot, and ask yourself if you've done this, is when you see good ideas that are implemented that are very similar, maybe even exactly like a thought you had many years ago, you will say, I had that idea. I could have been rich. I could have whatever. And I think this is a really common phenomenon. I don't know if this occurs to me more often than other people, but here's the thing. Ideas are a dime a dozen. They really are. There's no shortage of good ideas out there, and each of you have had great ideas, but implementation is where it's at. Those that find a way to implement their best ideas are the most successful people. Even if they don't have the best ideas, those people who are masters of implementation will get ahead. They drive innovation in their business. Therefore, what I would encourage you today to do is learn how to become a master of implementation. And then the degree to which your ideas are better and better, you will experience more and more success through the implementation. But the real key is the implementation, because even if you have just a little tiny idea and it's not that great, it's not that innovative, but it represents an improvement in your business and you are a master of implementation, then you will affect positive change in your business. So let's go through, in a nutshell, what do you need to do to become a master of implementation? Okay, so take yourself in your mind's eye to where you have one of these ideas. And hopefully you've got several ideas right now that you haven't implemented, and you can start with one of those. You don't have to wait for the next epiphany to occur where you come up with some great idea that you have to implement. You should be able to do this today. So this step one for becoming this master of implementation is to document your idea. And I want you to document your ideas in two ways. One, I want you to document them and sort of just have a place, and it's probably just something for you. Maybe you share it with one or two other, key team members and stakeholders that collaborate with you. But it's a place where you can just throw down a mishmash of your ideas and thoughts. Because when you are excited about a new idea, there are lots of things that occur to you. And you want to encourage that. You want to have this sort of brainstorming sheet, I often refer to as a parking lot, somewhere where you can put things that maybe you're not working on at this instance, but you don't want to forget them. Because we've all had that experience where last night you woke up in the middle of the night and you had an epiphany about how you could improve an idea, or you had a new idea or whatever, and you failed to document, and then later you're like, I had a great idea. What was it? There's that episode of Seinfeld where he thinks he's come up with a great bit and he didn't, or he tried to write it down in the middle of the night and he couldn't read it. Anyway, I digress. So the first of the two ways you're going to document it is sort of a brainstorming sheet, a little parking lot somewhere that it doesn't have to be well organized. The second way you're going to document it is in a shared document, which you are going to document things as comprehensively as possible. Outline it and fill in all the details that you can. And you can go back to this. The reason I want you to share this document is with your collaborators, you want to encourage people to add thoughts. And the modern tools for cloud-based documents where you can share and collaborate with one another, you don't have to worry about something being revised and losing a previous version. You can always revert back. We won't get into the technologies now. Hopefully you understand that there are better technologies and lesser technologies in terms of sharing this. But the key that I wanted you to remember in terms of documenting your idea is just sort of a brainstorming sheet, a place for you to throw down thoughts whenever you have them, and ideas and details. And then the other one is more comprehensive and much more structured and well organized. And it's going to be the document from which you will develop a means of communicating your vision to others. Okay, so the first step is to document things. Part of this I want you to do, the next step, I'm going to call this step number 2, but it's also part of the documentation, and it can be a separate document or part of the same document, whatever you like, is I want you to brainstorm all of the resources you have at your disposal, all of them. So your financial resources, your equipment, your facility, your ideas, your team, your human resources. Just think of all the various resources you have, your specialized knowledge. I can go on. Document those, brainstorm them, put them down. Hopefully you've already done this and you have a place that you can go and you just copy and remind yourself, because it's really imperative when you are starting to implement an idea to give consideration to all those resources that you have, which will help you bring this to fruition. All right, the next part of this, and we'll call this 2B maybe, 2B or not 2B. This is the second part of documenting your resources, is I want you to now determine sort of a budget, and I don't necessarily always mean financial, although most things can be brought back to the financial aspect of it. I want you to consider what proportion of your resources you are going to dedicate to the implementation of this idea. Like, are you going all in? Is this a brand new business idea and you're starting from scratch, and then it might be all of your resources are going to be dedicated just to this? Or is this an innovation for your business? And if so, and then it's probably you can't afford to put all your resources in this, because you need to have resources to continue to operate your day-to-day business as it already exists. And you have to have a portion of those available resources that you've brainstormed that are going to go to this. So you might think, well, what is my financial budget? How much money do I have that I can invest in this? And where is that coming from? Where's the capital coming from? Is this a loan? Is there new money? Is this through savings? Is this the reinvestment in the business of profits? Think about that kind of stuff. And then the next thing, your human resources. I want you to really pay attention to this. And so this, again, you might think of this as 2C, is what are, or who are rather, the human resources that you're going to dedicate to this project and the implementation of this project. And it might be everyone. Maybe everyone has a role to play, and I say everyone meaning your primary stakeholders. But I would encourage you to reach out to your team. So you've documented this, you've outlined this, and now you're going to communicate your vision to the team. I'm sort of skipping ahead here. Because I'm on the documentation phase, but I would acknowledge that you have to have that documentation dynamic. You've got to be willing to change things as they happen over time. All right. So you're using this comprehensive, well outlined document to maybe communicate to your team. Now, maybe they read it. Maybe you do some sort of slide deck presentation. You say, here's an idea for innovation and improvement I would like to implement in our business, and this is the idea, this is the vision. And then you get feedback. Now, what I want you to do as it relates to your human resources and which people will collaborate on this is ask for volunteers, ask who's interested. because you want to try to have people who share your passion for the idea. If someone thinks, this is not going to work, I really don't like this, first of all, if that occurs, you want to consider the alignment of objectives within your team. There might be a reason that somebody actually thinks it's a good idea, but they see how it is going to challenge their employment security, or what it is that they get recognized for, or whatever. In some way, it represents and it stimulates their insecurity. And so when people don't buy into it, it may be that you did a poor job of communicating the vision. It may be that you have a bad idea and that person's right. And often it is that that person does not have an alignment of objectives with you. Their incentives to see this go through are not put in place. And so they might be apt to be apathetic at best, and maybe at worst they could in fact sabotage the idea. So go to those that actually are embracing the idea and they see the light and they say, yeah, you know what, I'd like to be involved, and ask people who wants to be involved, and then make a list of those collaborators. Those are going to be your people. Now you might think of this as a pilot project, and we've talked about that before, and that's the next step. Okay, so let's review so far. What do we have? We've got sort of this brainstorming document where you can put ideas as they come up. You've got a well-organized document that is dynamic, and it's outline of the vision entirely. Now you've got a list of all your company's resources. From that, you decide, well, how much of each of these types of resources am I going to dedicate to this project? And then you take another part of that, of the human resources. Who's most interested? Who's most passionate? Who's buying into this and really wants to see this come to fruition? And we name those as the primary collaborators. The next step is you need to document your current state. So what we did before, that outline and that comprehensive document that is really communicating your idea, your vision, that is the desired state. That's where you want to end up. And so the other part of documenting things is to take a look at where are we today, and contrast those things. So have them sort of lined up side by side. So you might want to take that document that is your vision document or your desired state, and right beside it have a very similarly organized document that communicates the current state. So I don't know, if you were doing some sort of facility improvement, you would have, well, here's what I envisage the future of our facility looking like, and it has this. Well, what does it have currently, where it will then have the example that you're talking about? So contrast, compare and contrast the current state with the desired state. Next, what you're going to do is, so we've already, I kind of glazed over it, but of course we've already communicated the vision to the stakeholders, and we've generated a list of the primary collaborators, those who are going to get things off the ground to begin with. Now what we're going to do is we are going to schedule an initial meeting, sort of a launch meeting, a kickoff for this pilot project, for this implementation of this idea. And in that meeting, you're going to brainstorm with everybody. And you're going to, again, communicate, here is the vision, here is the desired state, and here is the current state. And then what everybody in the meeting starts to do is generate ideas of what is going to actually need to occur to get you from the current state to the desired state. And it's just a brainstorm session. What you need to do in this meeting and all future meetings, all following successive meetings after this one, is you need to document these meetings in some way. You got to have somebody who is doing minute taking or record them. And it's certainly, if you're doing a video conference, and that's a great way that you can reference back. But even with that, I would still recommend that somebody takes a summary of the meeting minutes and communicates that with everybody. So just let people go wild and come up with all the ideas they can and start documenting those. Okay, to get from current state to desired state, we're going to need to do this, we're going to need to do that. Now these become action items. These are the things I talk about at the beginning of every video, an action item. along with an action item needs to go the RACI principle. And I'm not going to talk about that much today, so watch our video on RACI if you don't know what I mean. But of course, that's responsibility, accountability, or who's responsible, who's accountable, who is consulted, and who is informed. You have to mark that down for every single action item. All action items must have a RACI component. The other thing they all must have is a deadline. Okay, so watch our video on deadlines if you don't understand the concept. I know you know what a deadline is, but if you're not sure of how it relates to the implementation, have deadlines with everything. And the final part of that meeting will be to sort of create a transitional state that is a desired state, okay? So you've got your idea, your visionary idea that when the whole idea is implemented, you've already documented that. And that's the desired state entirely. But you want to book another meeting, a follow-up meeting, and depending on the scope of the work that's involved in implementing your idea, you want to have these at minimum once a month. And I would say a lot of times it should happen weekly, and then for very small ideas, you might want to have daily little sessions where you're getting updates. And this is, remember the quote that speed is a fundamental determinant of success. So you want to make sure that you are doing things as quickly as possible without sacrificing quality of work. So you're going to have to decide based on your idea what is practical for how often you can reconvene with the collaborators, but you book that next meeting and you've defined now, so you've got your action items, everybody's been distributed their action items and their deadlines, and the deadlines of those action items, many of them are going to be deadlined by the next meeting, but some of them will be further down the road, and those ones will probably have to be broken into more granular details. As the person explores trying to implement those little action items, they'll realize, oh, there's steps involved in this bigger action item, and that's why we've given ourselves a month for this, but there's 4 steps to it, and I will accomplish each of those steps in the 4 weeks between now and the deadline. You get the idea of what I'm getting at there. But you've got your deadlines, you book your next meeting, and everybody is committed to coming back having accomplished the action items, or communicating with the group what obstacles they're running into before the deadline. And therefore they may need an extension, or they may need to say, I'm going to need extra resources, I'm going to need something like that. So you, as sort of the overarching head of the idea, you are the manager of this, you are the one who's in charge of implementing it, you are ultimately where the buck stops, you are ultimately accountable for this. So you also have your 4 obligations, and one of which will need to make sure that you distribute the resources and make sure that what you've decided when you ahead of time, you put aside a certain amount of money, you accrued and you've scheduled in time for the facility and all the various things, the manpower that's going to be required for this, and you are making sure that you're portioning that correctly. But occasionally what's going to happen is people are going to come back and say, well, I need more time, or I'm going to need more resources. And then it'll be up to you to discuss that with them individually, or wait for the group meeting if you want all the stakeholders involved in that discussion, depending on how big a change it is that's being suggested, and then adjust your plan accordingly. Now, this is a really good segue to a point that you need to understand about your ideas. The desired state will never materialize exactly how you thought it would at the beginning. If it did, it was probably a very, very small idea. But if you have a great idea, then it's probably going to take on iterations and evolve as you contribute with other collaborators and stakeholders. Everybody gets their contributions in and their ideas. And as you face obstacles and you find out what was standing in your way. Remember, the best ideas are highly improbable to put together. That's why they don't exist right now, is that they don't just happen by chance. People have to put a great deal of effort into making something come to fruition. And because of that, it also means that some things that you thought might be easier to implement than they turn out to be, you're going to have to take a different path. And, go with that. Embrace that idea and think to yourself, this is part of the process. And we are going to make this even better because of the various things that come up. And people push back. People think, I don't think that's a good idea. And you get all this sort of deliberation going on. That's part of the process, and you want to embrace that. The real key and the real point I was trying to make at this juncture in our discussion is to understand that it's not going to go exactly according to plan. It's going to go better, in fact, when you embrace that. And those challenges will prove to be real great educational moments for you. And your net result of the idea won't be exactly what you thought. It's probably going to be better because of all the various ways that people contributed. Think about, I don't know, whatever business that really impresses you, like Tesla or any of the big tech companies, Facebook, Apple. The iterations of their best ideas that exist today are not what the original idea was, right? That's why we talk about perpetual refinement. And so you're going to implement something to the best of your understanding and with the resources you have. And then as you have better understanding, more intelligence, more knowledge, and more resources to dedicate to this, you can do iterations of your idea and improve it. So just accept that to begin with. And getting back to the very first point I made, don't be concerned about keeping everything, so tight-lipped. There is a time and a place for proprietary information and secrecy when something is highly duplicable and there are competitors who are trying to solve that exact same problem right next to you. That's not most of you watching though, and that's not most of the ideas you have. Most of your competitors are not implementing the ideas you have because they don't have the time or the inclination. They are stuck in the tyranny of the urgent, like most entrepreneurs, like most ineffective managers. They don't know how to innovate. Now, I skipped a thing that's really important that I want to get back to, is your idea. When you're documenting it, I want you to document it in that outline and determine how it's adding value for your business, for your customers, to your product or service. Is it improving your customer experience? Is it improving the level of convenience for your customers? Is it improving the quality of your product or service? Or is it going to result in something that allows you to reduce your pricing or maintain your current pricing with a better margin? If your current pricing is already more than competitive and you've got an edge, and you've got an innovative idea that is going to increase your profit margin, that doesn't mean you have to lower your pricing. But think about those four constituents of value. How will your idea improve the value? That's part of how you're going to communicate this vision to your team. And I should have said that earlier. However, going back to this idea of secrecy, you're going to have to let go of that a little bit. In order to get people involved, you got to share your idea. You need collaborators. You need buy-in from your people. And the degree to which you have that will seriously impact the degree to which you are able to implement it. So think of it that way. Stop doing this thing where you're like, don't tell anyone. Of course, you don't want your people to go out and tell your prime competition what it is that you're doing. But what I want you to accept, the idea behind today's, no pun intended, behind today's discussion, is that it's not the idea, it's the implementation. It's you becoming an expert in implementation. So before we wrap up, let's just go through everything one more time in sort of steps here. All right, step number 1, you are going to create a brainstorming document. Somewhere that you can, as you go, and in the beginning, you can throw down all your ideas and you're not worried about how well organized they are. It's just a place you can reference so you don't forget anything. Step 2, or the second part of documenting it, is you are going to document it in a way that is much more well organized and is as comprehensive as possible so that you can use that to communicate your vision in some way to your team. And within that document, you are going to address the 4 constituents of value. You're going to discuss how it is in which of the 4 constituents of value your idea is going to improve value of your products or services, any combination thereof. You are also going to document, you're going to brainstorm all the resources that you have at your disposal as a company in general. Maybe that's in your business plan, and maybe you already have that somewhere. And it's good to brainstorm this from time to time to refresh your memory. Then what you're going to do from that is you're going to determine what realistically, what proportion of all the resources that I have at my disposal should I dedicate to this project? How much money, how much manpower, how much of our facility, how much of our time, all this kind of stuff. So you're going to document that. Then what you're going to do as part of the documentation process is you are going to think about who will you be your primary collaborators. And here's that point where I said, at some point in here, you have to now have your vision meeting where you communicate with those stakeholders, with your primary stakeholders, and you say to them, and you might have to do this more than once. You might be communicating with your primary stakeholders first, and you say, here's the vision. And then what you're doing is you're asking who wants to be involved, making sure that you take special note of those who are most passionate, those who want to bring this to fruition, and contrastly, which ones do not. And then ask yourself, what do I need to do to align objectives? Don't try to force anyone into the project that's not interested at this point. And then you may have to have some successive meetings with other more frontline logistical personnel who are also going to be involved. So now you've got this list and this document of who are the primary people that are going to bring this idea to fruition. They're going to collaborate, the collaborators. Then you're going to set up your first meeting, and well, I skipped a part of the documentation. You're going to then take and compare and contrast your vision, your desired state, with your current state. Document all your current state. Now you're going to set up your first meeting for all the collaborators to get together. When you do get together, you are going to go through, once again, here's the desired state, here's the current state. What do we need to do to get us from here to there on each of the components of the idea? And brainstorm. You're going to document that. You're going to have minutes. You're going to record this, and then you're going to take each of those things and create action items out of them. These are things, these are tasks that people must implement before the next meeting or before a particular deadline. You're going to assign RACI to that and deadlines, and everybody is going to be involved. And then you're going to book your next meeting, and you're going to book recurring meetings to the end to make sure that this overall is going to be implemented. And you're going to amend all of your documents and your deadlines and your allocation of resources as is necessary as you gain new insight into what the challenges are and that kind of thing. That's it in a nutshell. That is implementation. That's what you need to do. I hope I'm not forgetting anything here, but that's where I want to leave it today. Remember that it is in implementation that you are going to drive your business forward, not in having the best ideas. That takes a little pressure off you. You don't have to have the best ideas, but you do have to implement your best ideas. And it's okay to, well, it's more than okay. You should be involving more and more of your team and creating mechanisms through which ideas can flow, because once you become a master of implementation, now it's all about give me the ideas, keep the ideas flowing, people here. Then you want to implement as many as possible, 100% of your ideas if possible. All right, so let me know in the comments whether you agree with this. Is there a major step that I forgot that you always make sure that you're doing when you implement? Is there somewhere where this is confusing? Would you like me to do a follow-up video? Ask questions, leave comments that we can all learn from. We need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.